In November 2018, 26-year-old John Allen Chau paid local fishermen to pilot him through the dark waters of the Bay of Bengal. He brought no survival equipment. Instead, he carried a handful of fish, a football, and a Bible he intended to use for conversion. After paddling his kayak into the shallows, Chau attempted to greet the islanders. The encounter ended when a Sentinelese child fired an arrow that pierced the Bible Chau was holding to his chest. Chau retreated to the fisherman's boat in a panic. That night, he wrote in his diary, questioning if the island was Satan's last stronghold. He chose to return the very next morning. The fisherman watched from the water as the islanders dragged his body across the sand. To the Sentinelese, Chau was a trespasser, triggering a lethal border control protocol maintained for centuries. Fearing the risk of a violent clash or the transmission of foreign disease, the Indian government made the decision to leave Chau's body where it lay. They maintain a strict eyes-on, hands-off. The Indian Navy and Coast Guard patrol a 5-kilometer radius around the island, preventing any unauthorized vessel from reaching the shore. This creates a unique geographical anomaly, a 60-square-kilometer landmass in the Bay of Bengal that remains entirely uncontacted. The island is naturally fortified. Shallow, sharp coral reefs surround the beaches, and a dense rainforest canopy prevents any clear view from the air. The islanders are maintaining a total physical separation from the rest of the planet. The tribe's hostility is rooted in a history of traumatic contact. In 1867, the merchant ship Nineveh wrecked on the reefs during a monsoon. The survivors reached the beach, where they spent 3 days fighting off the Sentinelese with sticks before the Royal Navy arrived to extract them. In 1880, British colonial officer Maurice Vidal Portman led an armed expedition to the island. His party kidnapped an elderly couple and 4 children, taking them to the regional capital for study. Having lived in isolation for thousands of years, the islanders had no immunity to foreign pathogens. The 2 elders quickly became sick and died. Portman returned the 4 children to the island's beach. They likely carried the same microbes back to their community, potentially triggering an epidemic. A century later, the response to visitors had not changed. During a 1974 National Geographic expedition, the Sentinelese shot the director of the documentary in the leg with an arrow. The tribe's violence is a defensive reaction, a historically grounded attempt to repel those who have previously brought death to the island. That defensive capability increased significantly in 1981, when a freighter called the MV Primrose ran aground on the reef during a storm. The crew spent days watching from the deck as 50 Sentinelese men on the beach began building canoes to board the ship. After a week of desperate radio calls for firearms, the crew was eventually evacuated by helicopter. The Primrose wreck was left on the reef, providing the Sentinelese with a massive, accessible source of high-grade steel. They scavenged the hull, cold forging the iron into arrowheads and spear points. This modern metal replaced their traditional bone and stone tools. By capturing this technology, the tribe updated their arsenal to maintain the isolation of their island. But the Sentinelese do not always choose violence. In January 1991, anthropologist Madhumala Chattopadhyay led a mission to the shoreline. For the first time on record, the islanders laid down their bows and waded unarmed into the surf to meet the boat. The researchers handed coconuts directly to the islanders in a peaceful, face-to-face exchange. The Indian government stopped these missions soon after, realizing that even peaceful contact could introduce common viruses that might kill the entire tribe. By putting down their bows for a single afternoon, the Sentinelese demonstrated that their hostility is not an instinct, it is a choice. Despite centuries of passing maritime traffic and modern air travel, very little information about the tribe has ever reached the mainland. Their language remains unclassified, and no one knows what they call themselves. We do not even have an accurate count of how many people live in the forest. Following the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, many assumed the low-lying islanders had been wiped out. Instead, they appeared healthy. They had apparently read the receding tide and used their knowledge of the environment to move to high ground before the waves hit. Inside their huts, observers have spotted wooden boards with 64 alternating squares, a perfect replica of a chessboard with no documented source. Their ability to predict the ocean and their use of abstract objects suggest a culture that is fully aware and thriving, even if it remains invisible to us. The rainforest continues to hide the details of their daily lives from aerial surveillance. Neighboring Andaman tribes that were brought into the modern world saw their populations collapse by as much as 99% after contact. The Sentinelese maintain their outrigger canoes, but never use them to leave the shallow reefs. This is a permanent standoff between global connectivity and a small island's independence. The Sentinelese are not a lost people. They are survivors who looked at the outside world, weighed the cost, and locked the door.